In May 1915, the RMS Lusitania crossed the Atlantic as one of the most recognizable civilian ships in the world. And yet, by that afternoon, she would be gone. She was not a warship. She carried no guns. Her route and schedule were printed like any other civilian crossing. Everything about this voyage sold the promise of safety, or at least the belief that some rules of war still applied. Passengers boarded assuming that civilian life remained separate, that ordinary travel still existed outside the battlefield, that certain ships were not meant to be targeted. Families arrived with luggage, not protection. Children walked her decks unaware that the ocean around them had already stopped being a civilian place. By every standard of her time, this ship should have been untouchable. On May 7, 1915, a German submarine fired a single torpedo. There was no warning shot, no demand to stop, no time to organize a controlled evacuation. The explosion tore into the hull, and then came a second blast, faster, deeper, and still debated more than a century later. Within 18 minutes, the Lusitania slipped beneath the surface. Nearly 1,200 people did not survive. This was not an accident at sea. It was a decision, and the world would live with it, because what followed was no longer just about a ship. It was about whether civilian life could survive modern war, about who accepted the risk and who paid the price. To understand why the sinking of the Lusitania changed the course of the war, we have to begin with what the ship represented long before she ever sailed into danger. Because the Lusitania mattered long before she sank, and that is exactly why she was noticed. Long before the war reached her decks, the RMS Lusitania had already become something else. Not a target, but a problem. She was not simply a means of travel. She was a statement of speed, scale, and modern industry, proof that the Atlantic could be crossed on schedule, in comfort, and with confidence. Built at a moment when nations measured prestige in steel and horsepower, the Lusitania collapsed distance and time into something predictable. She made separation feel manageable. She made continuity feel possible. But her importance extended far beyond engineering. Every crossing bound Britain to the United States, while America still stood outside the war. Mail moved, money moved, influence moved. The machinery of transatlantic life continued to operate as if conflict had not yet rewritten its rules. That visibility mattered. German naval planners did not ignore ships like the Lusitania. They watched them. They took note of what they carried, and, just as importantly, what they represented. As long as vessels like this sailed freely, the boundary between war and civilian life still appeared intact. Commerce still moved. Public confidence still held. And that boundary was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. The Lusitania's value had nothing to do with armament. It lay in what she enabled: connection, normality, and the belief that modern life could continue uninterrupted. Once a ship carries that kind of meaning, it is no longer just steel and engines. Every decision surrounding it begins to carry weight, and the decision to let her sail would soon carry consequences no one could fully control. By the spring of 1915, the danger was known, but it was treated as manageable. The Atlantic had stopped being neutral water, even if it still looked that way. German submarines were attacking shipping around the British Isles, and the rules that once governed civilian travel were already thinning. None of this was hidden. In American newspapers, German authorities placed public warnings beside passenger schedules. They did not name targets. They did not predict outcomes. They were warnings designed to exist, not to persuade. The RMS Lusitania was listed anyway. The decision to sail did not belong to a single person. It belonged to a system, to a company that believed speed reduced risk, to officials unwilling to disrupt commerce, and to habits formed in a world where transatlantic travel had always continued. Passengers encountered the same information and reached very different conclusions. Many never saw the warnings. Others saw them and dismissed them as propaganda. Some read them carefully, weighed the risk, and boarded regardless. At the time, nothing about the voyage felt unprecedented. The Lusitania had crossed the Atlantic before. She was fast, she was famous, and she was still operating as if civilian life and war could remain separate. That belief shaped the final decision. The ship sailed into waters where assumptions mattered more than certainty, and those assumptions would be tested within minutes. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the moment for choice was already gone. Shortly after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the RMS Lusitania entered the final stretch of her voyage along the southern coast of Ireland. The sea was calm. Visibility was good. On board, nothing suggested urgency. Below the surface, a German submarine had already made its assessment. There was no exchange, no warning. The interval between detection and impact was measured in seconds. A single torpedo struck the starboard side of the ship, tearing open the hull with force no civilian vessel was designed to absorb. Moments later, a second explosion followed. Its cause has been debated for more than a century, whether ruptured steam lines, shifting cargo, or something else entirely. Whatever its origin, the second blast changed the outcome. The ship began to list almost immediately. Water-flooded spaces never meant to be breached. Power failed. Communication collapsed. 18 minutes passed, faster than any evacuation plan could account for. The angle became too severe for lifeboats to be launched safely. Some were crushed against the hull. Others spilled their occupants into the sea. The Lusitania was gone before order could be restored. Nearly 1,200 people were dead or dying in the water. There was no prolonged engagement, no recovery of control, only the sudden collapse of a system that had been assumed to be stable. And with the ship gone, a new question took its place, not about how the Lusitania sank, but about what exactly was inside her when she went down. The ship was gone, but the argument had only begun. Almost immediately after the RMS Lusitania disappeared beneath the surface, attention shifted from the wreck to what she had carried. The passenger list was never in doubt. Families, civilians, children, that fact has remained uncontested. The questions focused elsewhere. Official records confirmed that the ship carried cargo. That was routine. Passenger liners crossed the Atlantic with goods every day, even in wartime. What unsettled observers was the scale. Millions of rounds of small arms ammunition were listed on the manifest, packed in crates, documented, and legally exported under the rules of the time. Only afterward did the qualifications appear. That such cargo was permitted, that it was common, that it should not have caused a catastrophic explosion on its own. Yet the second blast changed the discussion. Whether the ammunition contributed directly to that explosion remains disputed. Some investigators argue it could not have detonated. Others suggest it may have intensified the damage once the hull was breached. The second explosion gave that debate permanent urgency. Questions then expanded beyond ammunition. Industrial materials, metals, chemical components, none of them unusual for civilian shipping, but all of them increasingly controversial in a war where distinctions were eroding. Every inquiry produced the same pattern: partial disclosures, carefully phrased denials, and records that never quite closed the case. No single document resolved the issue, and it never has been resolved. That uncertainty mattered, because the argument was never simply about what was inside the ship. It was about whether the Lusitania still belonged to the civilian world, or whether the boundary between commerce and conflict had already been crossed. That ambiguity did not sink the ship, but it reshaped how the sinking was understood and why the world reacted the way it did. The ship sank in minutes. The consequences did not. What happened to the RMS Lusitania did not remain an event at sea. It moved ashore, into newspapers, ministries, and public arguments that spread far beyond the Atlantic. In Britain, the loss was framed as proof that restraint had collapsed. The dead were counted not only as passengers, but as civilians, evidence that the rules separating war from ordinary life no longer held. In Germany, the response followed a different line. Officials pointed to the warnings, to the declared war zone, to the cargo. Both sides spoke in facts, but not in the same language. Nowhere was that divide more consequential than in the United States. America was still officially neutral, yet American citizens had died on a civilian crossing, without warning, on a route that had long been considered routine. Names appeared in print. Photographs followed. Neutrality became harder to defend in public, even before it was challenged in policy. The sinking did not bring the United States into the war. No single event did. But some events change what becomes acceptable. Diplomatic notes were exchanged. Language hardened. Expectations shifted. From that point on, submarine warfare was no longer a distant European concern. It became a question argued in American homes, newsrooms, and political chambers. And once the war reached public opinion, it was no longer fought only by armies, but by ideas. The RMS Lusitania did not end the war, but it ended an idea. Before her sinking, there was still space to believe that civilian life could exist alongside modern conflict, that commerce, travel, and neutrality might survive if the rules were followed closely enough. Afterward, that belief was no longer intact. The loss of the Lusitania revealed how fragile those boundaries had become, how quickly assumptions collapsed once speed, technology, and total war converged. The arguments that followed were never fully resolved. What she carried, who bore responsibility, where the line had truly been crossed. But the impact of the sinking was not measured in verdicts or documents. It was measured in expectations. Expectations that millions of civilians would carry into the years that followed. What risks were acceptable? What warnings could be ignored? And how war would be understood when it reached beyond the battlefield. Some events are remembered not for what they destroyed, but for what they made unavoidable. The Lusitania lies silent beneath the Atlantic now, but the world she belonged to did not survive her.